This week on Rockstar Superhero. Damon Tate is just one of those guys who brings such a calm vibe that you get immersed in his world easier than you'd expect. Of course, this belies the intense nature of his band, the very awesome of Virtue. True to form, though, Damon is a guy who gets it out on stage and on record, and as I've said many times, it's always the guys in the heavy bands that have the least to prove. Besides, A Virtue proves the reason why they are making waves with the new singles Hypocrite and the previous release Sinner. Now's the time to pay attention to this great band. So let's just roll. This is Damon Tate, this is A Virtue, and this is Rockstar Superhero. It's rad to have you here. I really want to thank you for taking the time. A Virtue is awesome, so I can only assume, you'll be the better parts of awesome yourself, right?
Hey, thank you for having us, man. It's Like I said, I don't take it for granted of being able to talk to people or just, again, you allotting yourself some time and just being like, hey, let's just catch up. Let's just chat, talk life, music, kind of wherever the conversation goes. So
Yeah. Well, the conceit of this show is really about the artist as an individual, right? So, I mean, even though we'll talk about the band, and obviously we do want to talk about that. You guys have been together for a while. I love to learn about people like you, and what your journey's like. What do you love about, the business, so to speak, and what do you wish it were versus what it is, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
So, A Virtue's been around since 2008, if the internet is correct. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's like late 2008, early 2009. It depends on, I guess, which we had. Like most bands do, you have a couple lineup shifts in there.
Of course.
When you're trying to figure out how to get started again. At that time, it was like myself and Mike. We both played in another band before this one that kind of carried over into A Virtue. So it's like, that's where that time frame kind of comes from, and it's like him and I have been the two constants throughout all of this.
Yeah. Do you find though? So I'm a former session drummer, and so I've always found that, and this sounds awful, I'm going to out myself right now, but I've always found that I was the core of everything. Meaning, like, I wasn't just the drummer in the center of the band, but I was always the guy that created the bands. I wasn't jumping in. I was the founder, if you will. And with that comes a little bit of unintentional arrogance. You know what I mean? Like, this is my thing, man. Don't mess up my thing. Was that a hard thing for you to sort of be at the core of it and feel like it was a little more your baby than the other guys?
No, not at all. And honestly, I wouldn't even call it like unintentional arrogance. Versus just having a sense of, it's like passion. For the first time of, having a sense of ownership where something like your blood and sweat and tears is actually going to dictate the success or how far you're going to go with your projects. Because, I mean, I'm sure like anybody else that's been in a band before, it's like you kind of do recognize there are passengers and drivers.
Yeah.
And most of my bands, like leading up to this point, I can readily admit, like, I was a passenger, albeit like a vocal one, but it's like, I played bass at the time. I didn't really write any music or know how to. I just, hey, one of my friends that was super talented would write something. I'd be like, cool, let me bounce off that. So I guess it's learning, various skills at different times. Kind of like, you growing up, you're going through grade school or anything else. They're going to teach you how to write, teach you how to read, teach you how to interact with other students. Yeah. And it was just all necessary, all the necessary steps of the journey. But when we finally got to here, it's like, okay, now here's your chance to kind of put it all together and let's see where you can take it. And I mean, here we are now. So
yeah. No, it's so true, man. I mean, I think of bands like Chocolate Chip Cookies, right? I know that sounds silly, but let me explain. There's a recipe to putting together the ultimate chocolate chip cookie, right? Not too crunchy, not too chewy, melty, all the good things. but you can't just throw them in a bowl and expect them to become something. You gotta cream the butter first, and then you gotta add you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And bands, man, I mean, they can be completely chaotic with the wrong people in them. They can be unambitious with the wrong people. Everybody joins in a sense for a reason, but it isn't. To me, it isn't until you write a few songs, and especially if you lay down tracks. If you go into a studio and you hear that combination of forces spit something out that sounds pleasing to your ears or exciting, that's when everything changes.
It's I would even say too, when you start to, and this is what I say, like, so this is probably for my personal stuff. It's like when you actually start playing shows, when you're selling merchandise, and I would be remiss if I didn't say, it's like, okay, now you kind of see like, oh, I can actually take this into the business side. That's the thing that people don't like to talk about, is like, there's two words, there's music, business. The music is the easy part. That's the fun part. That's the, hey, let's get together and just, rip over a few things. This is originally, like I said, back in the day, it's like, you just get together, hang out, write some songs, and then you kind of realize, oh, people actually like these songs. Oh, wait a minute, people actually pay money for this. Oh, where's my money, or where's this? And it's like, okay, now we're starting to get into the territory of, well, as a business or anything else, you think about it like most business owners, you probably got to lose money or be in the red for the first anywhere from, I've seen like 4 or 5 to 10 years, potentially. And this is for regular businesses, mind you. With music being so volatile, with there never really being any like kind of constants, it's always shifting, especially, really since, and it's kind of great. Like, I started playing in bands at the beginning of like, the early 2000s. So you're thinking like Napster is a real thing now, illegal downloading, quote unquote, like the war against that, how it changed the musical climate and how people view it. And now it's just like, cool, let me just put some stuff on the internet and we'll see what happens. But then when people start to mess with it, you're like, some people, they want their piece of the pie. I don't know how they're going to get it, but it can definitely be an interesting thing, and it'll separate you from like, are you doing this with true artistic intent? Are you doing this to only make money? Or is there a little bit of both? And I think you need a healthy balance of recognizing where you're at, what your talents can do, but also at the same time, again, taking that sense of ownership like we were originally talking about, and being like, all right, now we're going to have to delegate. We're going to have to make roles. We're going to have to treat this like a company. Like, everyone's going to show up, do their part. You have to treat it like a job.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about music though, like if it's put together correctly, going back to the recipe idea, if it's put together correctly, people who have just met you, just heard you, just saw you on stage tonight, they'll go buy your merchandise. They'll download your songs. They'll talk about you after a show. So there's something really awesome and immediate if it's done right, or if at least it's done in front of the right people, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the best part, is kind of like, when you have something, I think, good on your hands. Now, again, that's all subjective in most cases, but it's like, there's an energy, there's just a feeling of, I could pick anything from, a concert I saw last week to playing my first concert to back in the day of just, going. It's like, there's an electricity about, man, I'm in here with 500 to 1,000 to 10,000 other people. You're looking around, we're all in the same zone, the same vibe. Going to grab that shirt and being like, dang, I'm about to wear this thing next day. I'm about to stunt on everybody. I'm walking in here with this 3XL Deftones t-shirt. I don't care. But they didn't have my size. I'm getting something. We're
comfortable stage gear.
It did not matter what it was. I could walk up to you and be like, hey, do you have a medium? They're like, nah. I'm like, you got a large? Nah. Well, okay, we're gonna keep going until we figure something out. I just can't wear small. That's it. Yeah. I get you there. I got to get the XL, man, just for the sake of allowing my boobs a place to breathe. Oh no, we call those pecs. We call those man pecs.
Okay. So they're not. See, I'm just an old kind of disgusting old man. So
Never
they're
that.
definitely, once you're in your mid 50s, they're definitely boobs. For shows, you talked about this a second ago. I mean, look, you guys have been around a bit. You've released 4 EPs, right, over the last 15 years.
Let's see, 1, 2,
something
3.
like that.
We have 3 full records,
Okay.
and then some small like stuff in between.
Okay. So you've played a lot of shows. You played the big shows and the little shows. I mean, obviously, I think for your ego and maybe your pocketbook, if you can play some of these bigger shows, that's a great thing. But what do you dig the most? Are you a fan of that super intimate, super raw, tiny mosh pit? Everything's happening 5 feet in front of you, or do you like the big expanse of people?
They both have their pros. I can't even say cons because that's weird.
Yeah.
But they both offer something different. Like the intimate club show, like this past weekend, like we played a few shows with our buddies in the Plot and U, and it's like, you got about 300-400 people jam packed in these like smaller clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's almost nothing better than when you're just like, you can hear the venue pounding, people are clamoring for it. And when you walk onto that stage and it's immediate, it's electric, just a sea of people, like Tyler's climbing on everybody. We had, crowd surfers, you have moshers, you have 10-year-old kids in the crowd surfing, and just
so awesome.
That being their first experiences. So it's like that you almost can't beat that. Like I would take that 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
But then there's something when you're playing the large clubs, like the 1,000 and 2,000 cap clubs, or if you ever get to play a festival and you're playing in front of 5,000, 10,000 plus people, and you walk out and it's deafening. Yeah. It feels like just a sonic wave of just noise hits you, and it kind of almost, your world almost kind of goes quiet in a way where it's like you just look out and it's like, it's kind of like being in the desert and you see like the mirage, like the waves of heat, and it's just, but that's people, and you're like, that's haunting. It's haunting.
Yeah,
it really is. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it too.
Yeah, and I did this, right? I know it. People wonder why it goes to a musician's head. I'm like, man, when you look out and you see 10,000 people bouncing to you, they may not have been there for you, but they're there with you right now, right?
It's a moment.
That is an amazing thing. I do want to bring up one thing, because one of my favorite parts about playing on stage is when the PA is put together right and the stage volume is correct. Like, there is nothing better than having a punchy stage volume. And I get it. Look, I played way before the in-ear monitor world, right? I mean, so in my day, you freaking stuck toilet tissue in your ears and hoped you could hear after a show, and everybody smelled like cigarettes, you know what I mean? But,
I'm so glad those
it sucked. Anymore. It sucked. I remember going home at 4 a.m, washing my hair, and all this black stuff coming out, But dude, there's something about playing a festival. I remember I played a festival back in like 91 in Virginia Beach, and there was maybe 4,000 people. It wasn't a huge thing, but it was, big enough, and it had a really just a killer PA, and the monitors on stage. The side fills were huge. They had these huge bins. I mean, huge Van Halen type stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I remember the sound check. I've never been happier than that freaking sound check. Was like, all right, kick, thud, and it was like, boof. I mean, I felt all that bass, and it was clean and punchy. And it was just like, I've never played a better show, because we were rehearsed. My chops were at their best, and we sounded so good on stage. It just felt like an invincibility cloak had been laid on me. You know what I mean? It was incredible. So I know what you're saying, bro.
Oh yeah. No, it's something like I can't ever really explain it to people other than like, it's kind of like a drug in a way. Like when it happens and you're like, oh, okay, now you spend time, now I'm chasing that feeling again. And then when you get it and it's like, cool, I got it again, and it's, dude, I think one of the first, like, it was a Warped Tour back in 2011. and we had a chance to play one of like the big stages, and it was kind of cool. So, they used to do them at Comerica Park here in Detroit in the parking lot. We played at, I think they told us it was like, you guys are going to play at 11:45. We're like, sick, because that means there's nobody else playing, and
Right.
there's no big bands that are going to.
Nobody's tired. Yeah.
Oh, dude, nobody. We're the first thing that people are gonna. I'm about it, 100%. And honestly, we didn't think much of it. We just thought maybe there might be, a couple hundred people, because people scatter around. They like to buy T-shirts and stuff. And I'll never forget, like, and this is when we did have just amps and pedals and all that stuff. It's like I'm backstage, and like I go to check my guitar, and it's just like a quick jin jin, like. But then I hear, I'm like, what the hell? And I go and look out, and there's like 3,000 people just chilling, like 5 minutes before we're supposed to play. I'm like, where all these people come from? And the stage man, I remember him telling us, he goes, oh yeah, no, the next band doesn't play until 12:30. And I was like, oh,
It's on.
Oh, that was it. It was incredible. It was one of those things, like you said before. It's like, it's a feeling you can't. Like, small club shows are always going to have this, but when you can play those big ones where you're like, oh my, it's a moment, like you said, man.
Yeah. I mean, music is kind of a strange thing because, like, I mean, we're crazy people as it is, right?
That's
I mean,
true.
our focus, people don't get us. If you're not one of us, you don't get it because you don't understand the level of sort of again, I use the word unintentional a lot, so you have to forgive me, but that weird narcissism thing of just like, it's inside of you, you can't wait to get it out because you know it's good and you want to share it with others. And yeah, we're not really doing it for ourselves. I mean, it is a turn on to go on stage and be like, yeah, I feel good about me right now. But the fact is, hearing that audience go, and make that sound, that's what we do it for, man. It's what we do it for.
Oh yeah, dude? Again, it's, you kind of, like I said, you hit the nail on the head where it's like you try to explain it, and it's like you really can't. No. Outside of, I think the closest comp might be professional sports.
Yeah,
because it's like there's an energy, like, because I love sports, so I love basketball, I love football, playoff hockey is pretty sick. Like, I started getting into that a little bit more.
Yeah, Red Wings, baby.
There also might be something to say about musicians and sports where there's a lot of things in common about things not being in your control, and you just happen you kind of accepting some of the outcomes. Like sports, it's like I can't do anything about the finals.
Yeah.
But I'm amped up and I'm just excited to watch it either way. You want to see where the story's going to go, how it's going to unfold. And same thing, bands, it's like, there's always the little engine that could, where you're like, they might not be the most talented, they might not be this, but there's just something about them where they become the next big thing. And you're like, wow, I never saw that, but that's a great story. And it's one to, it's inspirational for anybody, where it's like, hey, you don't have to be the best.
Yeah.
You just have to be at the right place at the right time with the right work ethic to capitalize on the opportunities that are going to present themselves. So,
yeah. It's interesting too, man. Like, one of the things about the show, I love to talk about the formation of the artist, the early days. And I knew, obviously I knew I was going to talk to you. And I was thinking about the fact that, like, you've got so many genres of music, and then you have what I call regional styles, right? So you've got the West Coast sound, and you've got the East Coast sound, and you've got the Midwest, whatever that is, sound. You've got the Southern vibe, the Texas sound, all these things that are sort of easily quantifiable. But then you've got Michigan. And Michigan is completely, and I know this is true, so I'm not saying this because I'm talking to you right now. There's something about the state of Michigan that has completely sort of sealed itself off from influences around it. It's like its own thing. And I know a fair amount of people from Michigan, in the music business, and, like, rock still thrives there. I mean, like old school rock, I don't want to call it just blues rock or classic rock, but just whatever rock is defined as, it still exists in Michigan. And what I love about you guys, it seems, is that those isms that come from Michigan touch the core of who, of virtue is. Do you kind of agree with that statement that Michigan is a huge sort of impact on who you are as players?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like I could probably talk about this for an hour.
Please.
And because it's, no, Michigan is something special where it's like growing up and you kind of think about like, we have our own sounds as far as Motown. That was a gift from Detroit, Michigan. Like that to this day, we've gone all across the world and we still hear, Smokey Robinson. You still hear all these legends. Just their songs are timeless. So it's like, okay, we have that. You also have the Detroit Rock City moniker. You have just like classic rock will always have, and it's kind of weird for me to say it, like classic rock as I know it, it will always have a home here. I mean, there's even band like Greta Van Fleet doing like the retread, like they are doing a killer job. But at the same time, to counter all that, because obviously, those are mainstream genres at the time, it's like we still have an incredible punk and hardcore scene, electronic music. People like Detroit is one of those founders.
Yeah.
We have so many sounds and things. And I think part of it too, and this is to kind of get into like a non-musical sense, but just having seasons, being able to have your mood, because your mood can be dictated by the weather. Whether, if it's sunny outside, I want to put the top down, maybe listen to the Beach Boys or something like that. If it's raining or I'm feeling kind of gloomy or I'm in my own head, I'm going to pop on some Big Sean,
Nice.
If I want something, super loud, just, hanging out, I'm going to throw on some Suicide Machines or whatever it is. And it's like, you don't get a lot of places where you can combine all those elements and all those things and have a pretty high bar too, because the other thing about like coming up in Michigan's music scene and like for us, there really wasn't like bands that sounded like us.
Yeah.
But what it forced us to do is like, hey, we had to go into the punk and metal scenes. You had to go into the hardcore scenes. You had to go into the indie rock scene. And if you can impress those people, because here in Michigan, they're not very easily impressed. I can also put that myself into that category where it's like, we've been to any place that you could possibly imagine. And it's like, anytime we come back here, you'll find a band that nobody knows about that will blow you out of the water if you are not careful.
Yeah.
It really is something. There's not a lot of places that I can say can do that. And I'm thankful that we had the chance to kind of cut our teeth here and help it kind of integrate and be, shape who we are.
Yeah, man. I mean, well spoken. There's, again, I mean, I don't want to hit on it too much because there's a lot of other things I want to ask you, but yeah, man, like, I mean, I hear traces and probably because I'm trying to hear traces, if that makes sense. But like I hear traces of MC5 in what you do. Somehow there's the pieces of that DNA are in your music. You know what I mean? I don't know even how that happens because I'm not saying, I mean, you didn't even mention it once. So I can't imagine that that's the kind of band you're necessarily listening to, but it's sort of a weird, the proxy, the default of being a local, you can't help but have all those things sort of, encroach on your musical styles, probably because of somebody in your family listening to it, or, what your parents did, or the things they talked about when you were young. You know what I mean? Just can't help it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about just the lineage that you can draw with music is that you can sit here and tell me like, man, I hear some MC5 and it's like, I know who that is. I may not have ever listened, but them being as profound of an artist as they are, that's the ripple effect through generations where sometimes, I mean, I've met people before where they're like, oh man, you sound like this, or you guys remind me of, I've never heard da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, to me, I'm like, oh, this is just me doing like a Slipknot impersonation. Or I was just really into this one record at the time, but they don't know about it. They just know what they know. And it's kind of our job also to be like, hey, if you want to peel back the curtain a little bit, this is kind of where and they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And it's like, most people don't do that. Most people don't actually trace a line back through history.
Yeah.
It's, it's you or myself, my other bandmates, where we listen to music and you're like, oh, okay, I see where they got that from, or
Yeah.
oh, this kind of reminds me of this, and it's like it's fun to kind of trace through generations of bands and just kind of see, hey, there might have been, an underdog back in the day that, maybe they're not the biggest thing in the world, but they influenced the right band, and that next band took what they did and really made it, their own, and kind of made that whole thing come to fruition. So it's so interesting, like to this day. Like I'll never get sick and tired of kind of like going on that journey of like just seeing who, what, where, why, how. It's a part. You can't escape it.
You can't escape it, but there is something cool that happens over time. I mean, now that you're an established musician, like, we said a second ago, you basically been a band for the last 14, 15 years. You can't help but, with time, find your own voice. So you can initially start, name a famous band, and you look at that first record, and it's always kind of sounds like their influences, right? Like Muse sounded like Radiohead, as an example. And they, obviously turned it into their own thing. And honestly, personally, I fell out of love with them because I loved when they sounded like Radiohead, if that makes sense. That was my thing. To me, they continued on the thing that Radiohead abandoned when they went to Kid A, right? But I imagine with you, the same rules apply. It's internal. It's within the band. So do you find it easier to write and arrange songs nowadays compared to the early days? And, how much do you think your songwriting abilities have changed?
Oh, 100,000%. And
of course,
it's morphed even over the past couple, like I would say, like the pandemic, as bad as it was in some economic senses, for a lot of musicians, a lot of my friends too, it's like, it really gave us a chance to sit down. You're not touring. You don't have to worry about, kind of like the day to day as much. And it was like, hey, you can't get in a room together. So we had to all kind of go back to our workstations, and it's like you're transferring files. You're back to kind of like the more quote unquote, like the, tape trading, file sharing kind of thing, where it's like, you hand out CDs and this, that, and the third, except for this time you're just using big FLAC files and just sending them across WeTransfer.
Right.
But it was dope because, again, we got a chance to, I have plenty of talented friends. We have met so many people where it's like they're indie rock artists, EDM artists, hip hop artists, or whatever it is. And it's like, that became our process of just, let's just reach out to as many people as we can. Let's just try doing it this way. And then when we finally got back into the room, like our process for a while, like I would just sit there, I would write an idea, show it to the rest of the guys, and then we work on it. Or somebody else would bring something to the table. And it's like, it kind of was like a little more fragmented. Mm-hmm. But in this case, it was like, I would say now we're more in the sense of, we just don't bring any ideas. Just soak it all in. You'll always have some in the back pocket just in case something goes wrong.
Right.
But it's like, the best ideas and the best things, at least right now, have just became spur of the moment, because everyone almost kind of is able to look at their time as more valuable now, as this thing, our ecosystem was broken for a long time. 2 years is a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially you don't know it's coming back. It's still not even really all the way back.
No.
And it was just, hey, go back to the love of it. Not saying that it ever went away, but like anything else, you have a successful podcast. That just means there's going to be other responsibilities that come with your podcast, right, aside for just setting up the mic, getting the person to talk to you, and that's that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But this was getting back to the basics.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's so true. It's so funny. I've been saying this a lot for the last year. And of course, because COVID has kind of mellowed out, right, in this last, certainly the last 8 months, that, it's started to stop being part of the daily conversation, if you will. But I definitely consider it a huge equalizer. It brought a lot of us down to, and I don't want to reduce the value of inhuman. That's not what I'm trying to say, but it brought us sort of all back down to each other's level. For the most part, we're kind of all of a sudden on the same playing field. And And because of that, Damon, we actually stand out now. I know that sounds absurd. It should be the opposite, but we stand out now because we clearly, you in your space, me in my space, we clearly have refined what we're doing, right? And so when people all of a sudden, quote unquote, the everyman sees what we're doing, they're like, oh, well, that kind of pops. You know what I mean? Before they weren't paying attention because they were so focused on their thing. But now that they can't necessarily do their thing the way they used to do it, they're looking around going, oh, I see that. That's pretty interesting. What's your take? What's your take on that?
No, it's that. I would even say too, it's not just other people around us. It's myself. Like I've taken, like a variety of odd jobs and things. But it's like, but you go around and like the people that I come in contact with hundreds of people every day. And even for me, sometimes it's like, I was talking to our drummer about this. It's like, there's people that you don't really notice that are kind of in the same role as you, whether it's, the guy that's stocking coolers at the grocery store, or, somebody that's cleaning out stuff at the back of a gas station, or just kind of like these roles and things in spaces in society where you're like, this is the gray area. These are the people where it's like, when you're really getting into the stuff, like every day, like blue collar, hard work, you're really getting after it, getting out there. And it's like, I've been in that. I still am in that. But sometimes, I don't want to say you lose sight of it, but it's just like when you travel, when you're doing all this, it's like you're just kind of accustomed to being venue to venue. You come in contact with industry people or, fans or whatever the case may be. But it's like, again, this was a reset of like, when I'm going around and I'm talking, they're like, oh, we see you like this. But it's like, I see you more importantly. And it's like, that even allows me to convey what I want to convey with this band even more, because it's like, you can internalize more of that energy, more of those everyday kind of struggles again, where you're like, in some cases, if you have to relive some things, or if you had to take a step backwards, and it's like, it's not a permanent thing, but it's like, now you're like, if they see me in that light, it's like, I see you in a different light too. And let's, again, have that harmony, and then take that and try to apply to something bigger than ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, that's really well put. I'm not going to blow smoke here, but I got to say this, Damon. I love how thoughtful you are, how eloquent you are. I knew this was going to be the way it was. I just knew it, and I admire that so much, because you're very aware of your surroundings, and I think that's a beautiful thing. If this particular interview could say one thing, it's that we shouldn't be aloof. We should be paying attention to our surroundings. We should be doing our best to serve the needs of others. And it sounds maybe a little cheesy, but man, don't we do better when we're all sort of looking out for each other and not feeling superior because we're on a big stage in front of 10,000 people? Because it's really easy to kind of lose your place in life when people are hailing you for being a celebrity when you're not even kind of close to being a celebrity.
Oh, absolutely. And it kind of, I would say that it just goes back to, it's easy to lose sight, but at the same time, for us, and this is just kind of like the thing that we've always grown up with. It's like, we're human beings, you and I, anybody else, like those 4,000, those 10,000, 20,000, shit, 50, 40, like, this is a symbiotic relationship, because guess what? If there was no audience, you just have a bunch of dudes like me playing to a bunch of dudes like me. And it's like, okay,
I've done those shows.
Where the hell? That's not getting me anywhere. That's, it's cool. I guess it's an ego stroke of whatever it is, but there, like I consume music as a listener. I love to go to concerts and engage with the artists and have that energy, so that when I go to the concert, it's like you kind of feel the same love and anything else. And you just have to remember, it's like, it takes one to feed the other. Anybody, like, the real rock star stuff to me, I won't say the idea of it is antiquated, because anybody's just like, oh, it's just you're doing blow and banging a bunch of girls and blah, blah. It's like, sure. Nah, man. The true, like, meaning of like being a rock star, in my opinion, and just kind of like the attitude that we take is like, there's always going to be the moment. Like, we're not going to sit here and lie. Like, when you get on stage and you realize, like, I'm a part of this moment. People are here either partially because of me, and if they're not, they're going to know who we are after this.
Right.
There's a healthy amount of ego to be able to be like, all right, I'm going to dominate in this setting. We're going to have some fun. We're going to leave our mark. But then it takes the true sense of like when you're coming back off of it and you realize, okay, cool. Now I'm stepping off of this platform, but I'm moving back into the role of like, let's talk, let's converse.
Right.
Tell me about you. I'm going to tell you about yourself. You integrate yourself into that audience, into wherever you're at. And if you can do that, and sometimes it's harder. Some people don't have the personality for it. They're just not, that might not be their role. But at least you take that and you're cognizant of the fact that without this person here, without that person buying that ticket or that t-shirt, the promoter, the venue owner, the city, the licensing, all that others, there's so many little steps and things that it's like, you take away one thing, that rock star that, quote unquote has all this power, they don't have anything else anymore after that.
Yeah.
So it's be mindful, contribute what you can, have fun, enjoy it as much as you possibly can, take as much of it, soak it in, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Being grateful for all the wheels in that system, right? Because everybody has a role to play, and if they don't, your supposed celebrity is going to fall off the edge of the cliff pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, they're the ones we give celebrities power. If we deemed you to not be, worth our time or anything else, no one's going to be paying attention. No one's going to be doing this. So it's like when people deem you worthy of their time, that is a special thing.
Yeah.
It's something that you don't take it for granted.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope you write a song about it. You wrote that new single, Hypocrite.
Yes.
Came out a few days ago, and it's been crushing the waves on YouTube. So that's exciting. I'm certainly excited to see what happens next for the band. So here's a funny thought. Who's the biggest hypocrite in your band? You don't have to out anybody if you don't want to, but I thought this might be fun to ask.
So I won't out anybody. I'll say something specific to myself, where in a funny sense and a slightly more serious one.
Sure.
The funny one is always like food, right? I love food. I love to eat everything and anything, sweet, salty, umami, like it doesn't matter. So there'll be the times where like, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to just trim up, to get into show shape. And it's like, you tell yourself, you go through the whole day. It's like, cool, I pre-made my meals. I'm doing all this. I work late as well, and I get back home and it's like, oh, there's some cookies on the counter. Oh, there's like nice little stuff. And I have to talk to myself because I'm like, you're not going to eat just one, man.
Yeah.
You know that if you open that bag, you're eating the whole bag, and it's going to be toast, and you're going to feel like shit, and then you're going to go to sleep. You're going to wake up the next day, and you're going to feel like garbage.
Yep.
So that's myself as far as like the silly one. The literal kind of more like the more literal meaning of the song just stems from kind of how we treat people in society. Like, I can sit here, we can talk about all the good things and this, that, and the third, but it's like if I don't practice it when I go out to a perfect stranger, someone that doesn't know me, somebody that I may never have another interaction with or anything else, it's like, then at that point, all I'm doing is just putting on a face of what I want people to see, what I want people to hear. And it's like, I've been guilty of that in the past. One thing that we all took note on during the pandemic or anything else is just how people are treating each other on the internet, in mainstream media, with all of the stuff that was going on, whether it was political, whether it was, the violence being perpetrated by, a police force against, persons of color, and the inevitable divide that's going to come on that, whether it's the All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, this kind of thing. Like, just seeing people just going after one another without ever having any real discourse. Like, what is the underlying problem? What's the root here?
Yeah.
It's when you go out and you have community leaders that say one thing, say they're going to uplift you, say they're going to add funding to musical programs, art programs, anything else. But at the same time, they're just, looking you dead in the face and then stealing from your pockets at the same time. And it's like, that's, the chorus of the song, like we're saying, it's like, you say you pray for me. You say that you want me to do better, but at the same time, you're killing me.
Yeah.
Like, we do that, us everyday people. We do it sometimes, like, I'm going to use your word, unintentionally. We unintentionally, because of things that were learned, things that we grew up with, or things that we see, and there's just a quick knee-jerk reaction. We're like, oh, no, that can't be right because it threatens my belief system in this regard. Or it's a viewpoint that we're not ready to be exposed to or ready to be willing to accept. And that's the hypocrite in all of us. That's the ongoing life lesson it does. I will never meet a person that is perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. But this is just kind of the look in the mirror moment of like, hey, kind of like the visual entails. Yeah. And there's some subliminal stuff too. There's a reason why, we chose like the forest, the earth burning. That's a topic right now that people don't want to admit is a real thing. No. People want to come out here and say global warming is a hoax when our ice caps are melting and species are going extinct at a more, at a higher rate than ever at any point in time in human history.
Yeah. Everything's ramped up for sure.
And it's like, if we don't have those call to action moments, these looks in the mirror where you're like, everything is intentional. Words are intentional, whether you intended them or not.
Yeah.
So hopefully, people take that message that we try to put out there, and it's like, just take a look. When you wake up and this morning you look at yourself in the mirror, it's like, can you say, hey, I'm doing the best that I can? Or is there still something, hey, you might be wrestling with, you might have to write it down, and this is going to be a part of your journey to kind of separate yourself from that and be like, okay, how do I better myself? How do I get myself out of this outdated methodology or way of thinking and provide that positive energy to the world?
That's so awesome, Damon. It's interesting to me, as you were talking, I was thinking about how often do we hear this message in songs or in some sort of in political discourse, wherever. I mean, we're constantly being bombarded with what we should do that's good, right? How to do better for the planet, how to do better for each other. The but is, and I'm not saying we should turn a blind eye, but the but is human nature. It's almost like, to me, like the greatest sin of man, if there's such a thing, is pride. We can't get out of the way of what we want and how we feel about ourselves to actually do what's right. It's such a bizarre thing that you and I could be standing on a stage in front of 100,000 people and not preaching, but, like you said, singing this song, doing this song. And people are going to take that message with very much a grain of salt, because a lot of them think they're already doing the right things, right? And the rest of them are saying, please don't tell me what to do. It's an odd struggle. It's a lot like when I was a little boy, where my mom said, don't touch the iron. I just finished ironing those clothes and the iron's going to burn your hand. And I went right over and touched the iron. I burnt my hand. Right. And I mean, I remember I think I was 5. I remember it very clearly. I can still see where I was standing in the basement and everything happened. And I did that thing. And it's because it's not just childhood. We don't listen to anybody but ourselves. Mm-hmm. We need to hear the same thing over and over again. We need to experience the consequences over and over and over again. And even then, most of the time, we don't stop doing, because we want what we want. We're dumbasses. We're petulant. We're childish. Again, we're narcissistic. We want what we want at all costs. So I guess what I would say to you is not really a question as much as, please keep preaching. because I think it's important what you're saying. I think it's incredible what the band is doing. And, if you can turn just one person, man, you've done something very few other people could do. So I think it's badass.
Hey, I appreciate it. And it's at the end of the day, it only takes one. I might not, be a politician or, ever want to go into that field, but you never know that you look down the line when, my generation starts to be becoming the people that, they're occupying the Senate seats. They're the congressmen and women of our nation. And it's small moments. You hear these people all the time. They'll get up there and it's like, oh, so-and-so liked this, so-and-so like that. It's like, well, they used to be young adults and young men and women, as well. So it's like, you never know what things can form those ideas or what can shape those ideas, whether it's in musical form, books, that's a lost art right there. People, please read. Those things still exist.
Yeah. Kind of a big deal too.
Just saying, you can crack open one every now and then. Go outside, just walk around, interact with your neighbors, talk with people that are older than you, that are in different phases of life. And we're never going to, I don't even call it preaching. We're just going to walk around, we're going to say what we're going to say. Yeah. We're going to be unapologetic about it. If people do have a problem with it, we're not going to, earlier in life, I might have responded differently, but now it's like, no, explain to me, please.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in like a confrontational way. It's like, I actually do want to know, because we all have stories. It's the whole theory of, when I was a young kid, my mom taught me, she's like, you go to a restaurant, you might get bad service, so you're going to label everybody else. Everybody else is going to have to live up to that standard now of like, you have to prove me wrong. It's like, no, people are human beings. You don't know what that person has gone through to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Treat them with dignity, treat them with respect. If they seem to be acting negative or anything else, figure out why, because there's always going to be a reason. Maybe they, maybe their car battery died. Maybe they only have, $10 in the bank to get them past.
Maybe they're terminally ill.
I try not to use like the such, the extremes, but exactly. They could have a family member. They could have a close loved one. You just don't know.
Yeah.
And to pour fire on something that you don't know.
Yeah.
And set it up and, burn. It's like, that's the wrong thing to do, because guess what that person's going to do now? They're going to only know the fact that they felt that way, yet the world did this to them. So now they're going to do it to somebody else. And it's a sick cycle where if you offer a helping hand, yeah, sometimes you might get burnt in the process. Like you said, you might touch the iron and you're like, ooh, I got burnt. Yeah. But then maybe, you wait a couple minutes and that thing gets a little bit cooler. And then you're like, okay, hey, I can touch this now. Now we can actually address what's going on here. Now we can really kind of figure out what the root is, what the problem is, if there is one. And just, go through just a couple more steps, just a couple more progressions. And we would all be a better place for it.
Yeah, man, I almost don't want to ask you any more questions, because that's a perfect way to end. Oh man, let me ask one more thing of you, because we're pushing up on that hour here. Nothing fancy, but the band's obviously released a single. I mean, what's coming next? What are we going to experience? Are we going to get a full album release? Are we going to get a tour? Where's the Virtue heading?
Right now, just little bits and pieces here. We are finishing up a couple of things. We have some spot shows that we're booking. One of my friends, his name's Nate. He puts on a show called Rust Fest every year, and he's had a chance to do it again. Obviously, stuff with the pandemic kind of got weird, but that'll be in late August. We're going to wrap a couple more dates around that. So right now, it's just we're going to put out these singles, man. We're going to concentrate on our release plan. There's a record coming. When it comes, that's going to be, I'll do the unfortunate thing for you where it's like, hey, everybody just pay attention to the socials. We're dropping plenty of clues and nuggets and pieces of information. So, you know how it is, at Of Virtue on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can follow our personal stuff. And really from there, like I said, I can't wait. We've been sitting on this for a while and working really hard. So shout out our team, everybody over at Rising Empire, FM Management, the rest of my guys. I think most of them are working right now. So
nice.
Get that money.
Yeah, yeah.
Still got to have day jobs. We're not quite there yet.
No, well, a lot of guys, man, they'll sell not 1,000. They'll sell 1 million records and still sleep in a car. I mean, It's not easy, man. It's a tough business, and it takes a long time for that cash to flow downhill to you. It just does. Okay, so one last question, and I'd like it to be just from your POV. But like, what's your favorite part of the day? I'd love to know kind of what drives Damon to get up in the morning. You know,
my annoying cat. That I had to put in the garage before this interview.
So your cat, you live for your cat.
It's funny. It's like I don't ever have to set an alarm, and he'll wake me up at the same time every single day.
Perfect.
But I would say just knowing, I mean, again, time on this earth is finite. I've had a chance to meet people that have been less fortunate with their time, wish they could have gotten it back, or, just that. And it's like, when I wake up and you almost kind of feel like you have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose, whether it's music, whether it's just being a servant to other people, helping people. It's like, that's kind of the thing where like I can get up and be like, I can stretch, drink my water and kind of sit there for a second, gather my bearings and go, all right, how are we going to tackle today? Let's take a look at the agenda and rock and roll. And some of the best moments, they could be, while I'm out working. It could be when I'm just sitting there playing the guitar and I'm like, you come up with a riff or, do some programming. I'm like, everybody else is going to love this. We're going to like this. Or even I'm at the gym, it's starting to get warm out now, so I can run, just no headphones. I don't even take my phone with me, which is probably a hazard just in case something weird happens, but just turn off, unplug for a second, and unplug for an hour, go for a run, go for a jog, just clear the head. And then, like I said, we kind of get back at it. And once the night comes, if I can look back at my day and be like, cool, I've accomplished these things, these little steps, put these feet forward, and then move on to the next day, then it's been a good one.